Hello, everyone. Jax West from Stephen Avery Project, MAM Gossip, and Justice with Jax on Facebook and Justice with Jax here on YouTube. Today is Wrongful Conviction Day. So, since I am back with the Marni Yang case, I decided today we would read the book that Marni's three kids wrote as a way to get back into this case, and more stuff will come out soon. I was with the case 2 years ago or so, and then was removed from the case due to a person who was running the Marni Yang team. We didn't agree politically, and she posted something nasty on my Facebook page, and people tried to use it as a teachable moment and tell her why what she said was ignorant. She decided to double down and post more ignorance, and then she removed me from the case. All fine. That never changed my opinion on the case itself. I go by facts and evidence and science, and everything shows that Marni Yang is innocent. So recently, Marni's father has reached out to me. Now I've got all these pop-ups popping up. Whenever I start this laptop, then all of a sudden, since I only use this laptop typically if I'm gonna do a live, sup cat. Okay, so the Marni's dad a couple weeks ago asked me to come back to the case. So here I am. We'll read this book. As I'm reading the book, I may not see your comments. I do try to look up from the book to see your comments, your questions, and answer it. When I'm here on YouTube live, I don't get as many comments and such as when we're on Stephen Avery Project, that sometimes it could be hard to keep up with everything. So, so I should be able to see your comments, but if not, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's because I'm looking at the book and not seeing there. So you may need to ask your question a second time, but feel free to ask me whatever on the case, and I will tell you what I can. Oh, but let me say, this YouTube channel, I don't pay a lot of attention to comments that get posted here. And I just took a picture of it because I saw as I was logging in to get ready to this. I did a live the other day. I'm trying to get into my pictures. And there's two comments on the video I just did the other day, both made by Barb Taddock. So I took a picture with my phone of her two comments. So she said, "Why are you lying, Jax? That is all Brendan's doings, not mine." And then the other comment she made is, "That is none of your business, Jax." So I'm going to guess what she's referring to is when I said that Barb is who controls Brendan's visitors list, and um and how there's the big debate on whether or not that was actually Bobby recently going to visit Brendan or not, which I personally really don't care if Bobby is going to visit Brendan or not. That doesn't change the fact that Bobby is who murdered Teresa Halbach. Whatever. But hi Barb, if you're watching this one too, maybe you're not since this one's about Marnie. Um, but hi Barb. All right, let's get into My Mom Marni. These are those are Marni Yang's three kids, Andrew, Emily, and Brandon. Andrew and Emily are twins. And this book that I've showed before, these are signed by the three kids. I've got three books that they signed that something was supposed to be done with these books, and the person who was running the case previously is no longer with the case, by the way. Never did anything with them. The foreword of the book is by Jed Stone, who is Marnie's attorney. And Jed is excellent at what he does. I just had a meeting with him on Thursday. So it begins with, I can hardly imagine the horror of seeing your mother go off to prison for life, knowing that she is innocent. When the justice system fails, the damage it does is massive. Wrongful convictions destroy lives. They destroy families. They damage communities. They allow guilty persons to roam free while incarcerating the innocent. Stone and Associates Ltd. is a boutique law firm that represents persons charged with serious crimes in federal and state courts. Our firm has been at the center of 9 exonerations of persons wrongfully convicted. I believe he's got another one since then. I want to say that he's got 10. In each case, their convictions had been affirmed on appeal. In each case, work done by lawyers, investigators, forensic scientists, and committed members of the public seeking justice for a fellow man or woman ended the legal nightmare and achieved justice. 9 exonerations. We believe that Marni Yang will be the 10th. A dedicated team of lawyers, activists, scientists, and criminologists working together are advancing Marnie's claim of actual innocence. This book is her children's story. It reminds us that we work not simply for our client's freedom, but also to restore a sense of justice for her family. That was written October 20, 2018. Chapter 1, Search Warrant. Search warrant, a man screamed, and Emily Yang opened her eyes. Emily says, I awake to see a gang of police officers running around and tearing our room apart. My best friend Fartun had slept over. She and I watched as drawers were being ripped out and all of my things were being thrown everywhere. All I could think was, where is my mom and what on earth is going on here? A few moments earlier, Brandon Yang was pondering the same question when he heard a thunderous knock at the door. Brandon says, I checked to see if mom was home and she wasn't. I figured she was at work, so I answered the door because they were the police. They said they had a search warrant and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stop them. Andrew Yang says, my younger brother Brandon was half asleep when he answered the door. At the time, I had no idea anything was going on because I was asleep in my room in the basement. When Brandon answered the door, it was the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force. Boo. Every time I see that the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force, I just want to boo because they are the evil. They shoved their way inside the house and down to my room. It was alarming to be awakened by strangers in my home. When I first opened my eyes from a deep sleep, I wasn't really alert. I should have been able to wake up in the comfort of my own home. It was 6 a.m., and suddenly a strange man was nudging me to wake up. It took me a few seconds to realize it was an officer standing over me. As soon as he turned around, I saw it said homicide on the back of his navy blue windbreaker. I couldn't believe this was happening. He told me to put a shirt on and to come with him. "What is this about?" I asked him. He said he would explain everything when we got upstairs. By this point, I was operating under the assumption this had nothing to do with selling a little bit of weed. The officer was scrutinizing my every move as I was getting dressed. "Are there weapons in the house?" he asked me. "No," I told him, "not to my knowledge." When we made it upstairs, I took a seat next to my little brother, who looked scared and confused. No sooner had I sat down when another 30 or more officers from the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force came busting into the house. I am not exaggerating. One right after another, they came in and began flipping our home out upside down, room after room. Hello, Corey. "Please do not destroy our home," I asked them politely. "Don't worry," one of them responded. "Those are not our intentions. Your home will be fine." "Can I see your search warrant?" I asked. "You will get a copy," I was told. However, I never got one. Andrew says, "This was a living nightmare. I looked down the hall, and the dining room looked as if a tornado had struck it. I felt so violated as our home was invaded. Why is this happening? Why are we experiencing such chaos? We are innocent children. Nobody deserves this. Had we been guilty of anything at all, perhaps some of this would have been understandable." "Where is my mom?" I asked. No one responded. No one would explain anything about what was going on. How is this happening? How are three innocent children being treated like this in their own home? What I didn't realize at that point is things would get much worse. Emily says, "My initial thought was, really, all of this for some weed? Because I got the chance to find out. A male officer told me to get up and come with him. I was a 16-year-old girl in pajamas with no bra on. Naturally, I felt uncomfortable, so I said I needed to change clothes first. No, he told me, which made me feel even more uncomfortable. I felt obligated to go since it was an officer ordering me to do so. As we walked through my house to the front door, I watched in horror as more of them were destroying every room in our home. We met both my brothers, Andy and Brandon, at the front door. The officers told my friend to stay back and have her mom come to pick her up. They took Brandon and me in one squad car and Andy in another. Andrew says, "We were ordered to come with the officers. Of course, I wanted to know why, as they still hadn't explained anything to us. One officer told us they needed to get us out of there so the task force could finish conducting their search. I paused and tried to think clearly. "Are we under arrest?" I asked. "No," he replied. "You aren't under arrest." "If we are not under arrest, then why do we have to go with you?" I asked, hoping we still had some rights. "Because I told you to," the officer abruptly responded. What? This did not sit right with me, but this officer was telling me otherwise. I felt so powerless, like I had no other choice. My sister and brother looked over at me and followed my lead. We reluctantly got up and started to follow the officer toward the front door. As I walked, I caught a quick glimpse of a few rooms they had already gone through, and I was devastated. I was so shocked at how bad they had flipped the house already. They even stomped a few holes in the floor. I couldn't believe how much disrespect they shown to our home. Stomping holes in the floor was completely unnecessary. They were maliciously destroying our house. My thoughts were confirmed when I asked them again nicely not to destroy our home, and one of the officers stomped a hole in the floor as if he was some type of bully. The officers were overtly aggressive when there was no need to be. We walked outside and stood in front of the house. Then my sister and brother were put into an unmarked vehicle, and I was escorted to another vehicle. Why did you separate us? I asked the officer. He told me there was no room, but there was clearly space for 3 people. These guys were playing games with me. I was scared for my brother and sister, and there was nothing I could do. I felt so helpless and still just couldn't believe that all of this was happening. Am I under arrest? I asked the officer again. Where is my mom? Where are you taking my brother and sister? You're not under arrest, he responded, and completely ignored my other 2 questions. He forcefully pushed me into the unmarked car. I asked him for a lawyer, and he said I wouldn't need one. I was beginning to get very frustrated with the games they were playing. I felt like I was being kidnapped. I knew I was overpowered. I was scared and was very angry because I did not ask for any of this. I had no control of the situation, and they wouldn't answer any more of my questions. I sat there distraught, having no idea what they were going to do with us next or where they were going to be taking us. Emily says, Where are we going? I asked. A ride, I was told by this smug officer. At that point, I didn't trust these people. 2 officers sat in front while Brandon and I were in the back, divided by a cage. I had my cell phone on me. I pulled it out and kept it low. I sent my mom a text telling her what had just happened and was asking her where she was. I didn't get a reply. I then sent a text to my grandmother, letting her know what was happening. Of course, she was concerned. She asked if I could come She asked if I could describe my surroundings so that she could come to find us, but I didn't recognize anything. All I knew was that we had been driving on an expressway for a little over a half an hour. Andrew says, after driving for what felt like forever, we finally arrived at a small building in the middle of nowhere. They opened the car door and told me to follow them. I did what I was told because I had no choice, but I knew in my heart this just wasn't right. Emily says, finally, we pulled up to a building. It was the Round Lake Beach Police Department. They separated my younger brother and me and led me to an interrogation room. That's when I finally got some inkling of what was going on. 2 officers entered the room. They introduced themselves and then asked me a question I never expected to hear. Do you believe your mother is capable of murder? Chapter 2, Growing Up. Emily says, at that time, I didn't have the greatest relationship with my mom, but what teenage daughter and mother did. Even though our mother adolescent daughter issues, I can still say my mom has always been my greatest supporter. Any dreams I had, big or small, she'd be there to help me live them outside of my mind. I remember I was 13 years old when Missy Elliott, one of my favorite rapper, dancer, record producers, had recently released her Under Construction album with Work It and Gossip Folks hip hop music videos. I wanted to learn the moves of the young break dancers Missy had in her videos. When I shared this vision with my mom, she encouraged me to follow my aspirations. I was never dispirited. She immediately went on the internet and researched dance classes and asked me which ones I was interested in so she could sign me up. I was fortunate enough to have her always support me in every way possible. Though I have not yet become a female breakdancer, the memories of my mom helping me work towards turning my dreams into reality have always stayed with me. My mom and dad divorced when we were young. My twin brother Andy and I were 6 or 7 years old, and our younger brother Brandon was about 2. He moved out of the house, and we'd stay with him on weekends, sometimes only every other weekend. I would say I had a better connection with my dad, so these visits were something I always looked forward to. A year, o- a year or two after the divorce, he said he was moving out of state to Boston, Massachusetts, to live with his brother and his family. I remember that day so vividly. He had been living in Schaumburg, Illinois with a friend. He was driving us back to our mom's house in Chicago, which seemed like a long drive. It's not all that far, but time seemed to go by so much slower when we were younger. He walked us to the front steps and hugged me goodbye. His last words to me were, "I'll call you when I get there." As soon as the door closed, I dropped to my knees while my hands covered my eyes. I cried my heart out, not knowing I would never see him again after that. Andrew says, I would describe my early childhood as being pretty normal. I grew up in North Albany Park, a neighborhood on the northwest side of Chicago. From the time I was born, we lived in a castle-like apartment complex off of Hollywood and Kimball Avenue. When I was 6 years old, my mom, Marni, along with my brother and sister and father, moved into a house off of Foster in St. Louis Avenue. That is where my life story started and where I would be shaped into the person I am today. Growing up in my first house as a family didn't last too long. About the time I turned 7 years old, my father and mother divorced. From what I remember, they never got along too well. My mom was a go getter with a lot of ambition and worked hard to give us the best life she could. My father was more laid back and enjoyed the simpler things in life. In simpler terms, you are a product of your own environment for a lot of reasons. I believe that's why my parents had such a disagreement. Many people would say my father was lazy, but I would beg to differ. They are just two different people. My father left and never came back. From what I've heard, he started a new family with a Cambodian woman and has two kids with her. I haven't seen or heard from my father in 20 years. Being a young boy in Chicago raised without a father figure, you can only imagine the things I endured while growing up. At a very early age, I realized I had to take on the role of the man of the house, and my mind matured relatively quickly. I had no choice being faced with the reality that my father was gone. Hey, sexy girlfriend. Emily says, my mom had to raise the three of us on her own. Sometimes she'd have three jobs at one time. She worked nights as a cocktail waitress server at quite a few restaurants, bars, and nightclubs over the years. In the late 90s, she worked at Excalibur Nightclub, Baja Beach Club, The Palm Chicago, and Jilly's Piano Bar. She was also very active in the community. She attended CAPS, which stands for Chicago Alternative Policing Strategy and Beat meetings. These meetings created a space for police and community to be able to come together to resolve issues we faced in the neighborhoods. That is where our family was blessed to have met the Roth family. Diana Roth was like a second grandmother to us. She was family. She had four daughters, Kim, Karen, Chrissy, and Denise. They all took great care of us, three kids, whenever my mom had to work. My mom was a real estate agent and eventually earned her broker's license. She helped many families find homes. She was also a landlord and owned some property in Marquette, a neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. She was down there a lot of the time from 2002 to 2005, doing a lot of renovation work and collecting rent. She always gave my friends and me an opportunity to come down there and work for some hard earned money. We would help paint rooms and clean basements in her buildings. Sometimes it was tough, dirty work. We once had to clear an attic filled with dead pigeon carcasses. Even with all the time she spent working, my mother still managed to actively participate in helping educate us in the many areas of life. We lived in a bungalow on the northwest side of Chicago in the Albany Park neighborhood. We had a big backyard with a treehouse and a pool. My mom always allowed us to have friends over and sleepovers. Our house was like the hangout spot. For us, friends you could trust or family. My friends would call my mother Mom. She always took care of us and made sure we were fed. You can say she was the mom of the block. Brandon says, Mom always kept our doors open for our friends during the holidays or any other day, really. She was a mother to them when their own homes were unwelcoming. That taught me that family isn't just about how you are related to someone by blood, but how you care for others who you aren't related to as well. I still have some trouble opening myself up to others now, but the friends I've made, I trust them, and they are my extended family, all thanks to my mom. Emily says, my mom was also the resident nurse on the block. Anytime one of the kids in the neighborhood got hurt playing, she would treat their wounds. She would take out splinters and clean cuts and scrapes. The kids who lived across the alley went to the same school, Wildwood Elementary. So my mom agreed she would drive all of us to school every day before she went off to work. We would jam to Bob Marley and the Wailers, and she'd stop and buy us each a Boston cream from Dunkin' Donuts. It was a tradition for a good while until she thought we were ready to start taking the school bus on our own. Andrew says, being a single mother of three, she gave us the world. She was my mother and father. My siblings and I attended a very good school, Wildwood Elementary. Our mom had us involved in many extracurricular activities to keep us busy a lot of the time. I didn't enjoy being so busy because a lot of my friends from the neighborhood got to hang around without a care in the world. At least that's how I saw it. Looking back now, I see why my mom kept us kids so involved with karate, organized sports, and musical instruments. You know what they say, idle time is the devil's playground. Brandon says, growing up, mom tried to keep us active. She had us in karate for a while and then later got us into football. At first, it was for us to stay active and help us grow. However, as things became more stressful and she began to work more, I think she just wanted to make sure we were safe and involved in activities so she wouldn't have to worry about us. Emily says, one day after school, when I arrived home, my mom greeted me at the door. Someone is waiting for you upstairs in your room, she said. Who could it be? I thought to myself. I ran upstairs, and there was this big brown and white, furry, wet nosed face sticking out from underneath my blanket on my bed. It put a smile on my face. I was very much a dog lover, but had never had one of my own before. I went up and hugged him. He was sweet, but very timid. He was underweight, and his elbows were all scratched up. It looked like he had been kept on a concrete floor. My mom was at one of her buildings when a man was asking around if anyone wanted to buy this pit bull. If not, he was just going to be used as bait. Ugh. In dog fighting, a bait dog is a passive or less dominant dog that is used to let fighting dogs attack and kill without the chance of the bait dog fighting back. My mom gave the man some money and brought the dog home. I can only imagine what would have happened to him if she hadn't. I'd like to think she saved him, or maybe he saved us. We named him Harley. My mom always showed compassion towards animals of all kinds. I remember she woke me up in the middle of the night and whispered for me to fetch some bread from the kitchen and to meet her in her room. I did so in a daze. With only the light from the moon shining down, I could see her body hanging halfway out of her second floor window, feeding a family of raccoons that were on the roof. I watched as the mama raccoon slowly came to her and grabbed the bread right from her hand to pass to her babies. Another time I will never forget was when my childhood best friend Robin and I were in our backyard running around and had come across a little squirrel who had been hiding underneath the central air conditioner. It looked frightened. We thought to grab some bread in a laundry basket from the house. We set the laundry basket on its side next to the central air conditioner with a sheet and some bread in it and left it there. When we came back, we found the squirrel curled up in the sheet and that it had eaten the bread. I grabbed the basket and placed it on the back porch so he'd be safe, then left to hang out at Robin's house. Later that night, when I arrived back home, I ran to the backyard to check on the squirrel. The laundry basket was gone. A wave of sadness washed over me. What could have possibly happened to him? I wondered. I walked in through the back door, and to my surprise, there it was, my basket. My mom had brought him inside and already befriended him. He seemed to have lost his fear and gained his trust in her. He was very friendly. He didn't have rabies or anything like that. We took him to a veterinary clinic where they happily checked him out. We named him Roscoe. We didn't have him as a pet. He was a wild animal which belonged in nature. He came and went as he pleased. After Roscoe, we took care of many more squirrels that came into our lives over my childhood years. Pepper, who was super friendly. Crash and Smash were two babies who we found together after they fell out of a tree. Storm, who we named because he was found during a thunderstorm. Brandon says, I remember coming home one day from school and getting scared that there was a dog there. I hadn't really interacted with animals before, except when they were on a leash. We hadn't owned a dog up to this point, and it freaked me out a little because I wasn't expecting it. It was a pit bull. Mom told us how she bought him from a homeless person to save him from fights because he was about to be used as the bait that would get the other dogs that were actually fighting riled up. I loved that dog, our dog named Harley. I am also very appreciative of the love my mom had for animals, which was instilled in me. Now they too are a part of our family as much as any one of our friends are, if not more so. Andrew says, I remember a lot of good times as a family and how my mom always pushed for us kids to be better. As a family, we were all very involved with martial arts, and it helped each of us to get better in tune with our mind, body, and soul. We took many trips to compete in tournaments with our karate school. It was a really big thing. We went as far as California and Florida to compete in these tournaments. I'll never forget when we were in Orlando and my mom surprised us with a trip to Disney World after we were done competing. We then stayed an extra few nights in Orlando, and it was something I will always remember. She also took us on a trip to Maui, Hawaii. It was so beautiful there. Everything from the volcanoes to the palm trees and the breathtaking views of the ocean. We learned to surf, we went snorkeling, and we even took a cruise along the Pacific Ocean. My mom really did some amazing things for us as a single mom. She's a very strong woman, and I admire her for the way she brought me up to be independent and never to give up even when times get rough. I really admire my mom. It's tough as a single parent, especially with three kids, and she did it with courage and tenacity. I would not be the person I am today if it wasn't for my mom. She made a lot of sacrifices for us kids, and I am blessed to say that because some grow up with so much less. Brandon says, football was fun, and I was pretty good. I played quite a few positions, but the spot I enjoyed the most and played most often was center on the defensive line, even though I was pretty small. My brother and sister were playing already by the time I started, and mom was an assistant coach. Despite her busy schedule, mom was always there throughout practice and every game. When she started having to work a lot more, she was unable to attend all the practices. However, she always made it a point to be there for our games, even if it seemed she worked to the point of exhaustion. Mom wasn't able to spend as much time with us as she wanted or we wanted. There was nothing we could really say, however, because it was for us that she was working so much. Even if we told her she didn't need to work so hard, she always tried to do more than was necessary. Mom had started scuba diving also, though I don't remember when. She would take me with her because when her group finished their dives, there would always be food afterward, and we would have a nice picnic. When I told her diving looked fun, she offered to pay for classes, and I gladly accepted. When I graduated and got my license, she got me a necklace and a pin as a present. Scuba diving was a lot of fun, but it was more fun because it was a chance to spend quality time, one on one time, with my mother. To be honest, that was the main reason I went scuba diving. It offered me a chance to be with my mom, which was a blessing since she was working so much. Emily says, it was 2002. Fifth grade at Wildwood Elementary was just ending for us. Flyers were being passed out in class to sign up for summer activities. Pop Warner Little Scholars Youth Tackle Football and Cheer and Dance teams for the Oriole Park Falcons. Oriole Park was only a 20-minute drive away from our house. My mom always encouraged us to pick an extracurricular activity that interested us. So I thought, why not give football a shot? Andy and I both decided we'd join the team. After the first practice, I wanted to quit. I wanted to give up because I was exhausted. All the running, the drills, the whole 9 yards. My mom wouldn't let me quit, though. Of course, I was angry. She was telling me to do something I didn't want to do. Looking back, though, I'm glad she did. Back then, I thought it was just a game I didn't want to play. But it was not until much later that I would realize it was much more than just a game, and only now have I appreciated its value. Besides the fact that it kept me in shape and healthy, it taught me teamwork, discipline, and dedication. It instilled essential life lessons, knowledge, skills, and awareness that would positively support me on my journey through life. I believe my mom always knew this. I must admit, though, I loathed practicing. I loved playing in the game. Brandon says, between my siblings and me, I was by far the one who spent the most time with mom. Sometimes at the end of a day, we would just relax and watch a movie or just some television together. Andrew says, our mom Marnie did an outstanding job raising us three kids by herself. She did date some, but didn't seem too interested in relationships after ending one with an abusive police officer by the name of Kevin. He worked for the 17th District, our neighborhood police department. Kevin had a terrible temper. I remember one time in particular when they were in an argument and Kevin locked them in the bathroom. Before I knew it, my mom was wounded and it looked to me like she had a laceration to her leg. It appeared that I think Kevin stabbed her. I thought the police were supposed to be the good guys. I was wrong. However, I didn't know how wrong at that time. My mother was very active with the police district of the 17th. She worked the CAPS program, which means Chicago Alternative Policing Strategy. My siblings and I were active as well, but not by choice. I grew a great deal of resentment toward the police after witnessing the type of person Kevin was and how he treated my mother. My mom had a falling out with Kevin, and I never heard or saw from him again, for which I was relieved. As time moved forward, my mom Marnie dated different men here and there, and she kept her personal relationships separate from her home life. I remember when she was dating a man named John. John had met my mom when she hired him to do some contract work on her house. They were together for quite some time. It seemed like he was in and out of her life, and I never liked him. I always had a funny vibe from him. After a few years went on with them being involved, it came to an end when my mom discovered that he was married to another woman. That really broke her. At age 11, I saw my mom Marnie at her lowest point. She was so heartbroken that she was on the kitchen floor in tears. Even a warm hug from me couldn't cheer her up. I was clueless about how to handle a situation like this, being so young. I had never seen my mom so despondent. I began to get frustrated with her being so depressed. Even as a young boy, I knew that something had to give. I finally built up enough courage to go and talk to her in the best way I knew how. I was angry and frustrated with her, and what started as a soft conversation turned into an argument. I told her she needed to stop worrying about John when she had us, her kids. We are here and we love you, I told her. You don't need John. You have us. I'll never forget her words. You're just a kid. Personal relationships have nothing to do with you. I'm the adult and you're the child. Don't tell me what I should or should not do. After these words, I stopped hearing how my mom felt. I was broken and hurt. And from then on, I felt my mom Marnie had abandoned me like my father did. Now, as an adult, I understand that my mom was just heartbroken. She didn't mean to hurt me, but she should have handled this better because those words stayed with me. From that point forward, I began to ask myself a lot of painful questions. Why has all this pain come into my life? Why are my father and mother not together? Why can't I live a normal life, a happy life? I was wounded. I was lost. I was confused. From then on, I began to act out. And where there was some trouble to get into, I got into it. I stopped listening to my mother. I started hanging out around the neighborhood every chance I got. I never liked being home. My mom dealt with her pain by throwing herself into her work, and often she was working 3 to 4 jobs at a time, so she wasn't home much. She would always have adult supervision for my siblings and me. But like I said, I hung around the neighborhood every chance I got. If I were to be asked who my role model is, I know I'd say my mom, Marnie. On her own, as a single mother, she took on the world for my siblings and me. I still was angry at the world. I had a lot of frustration and anxiety from the cards I was dealt in life and didn't know how to deal with these feelings. As I got older, I found myself in the midst of all sorts of trouble, being angry and confused because I didn't have a father in my life. I started hanging around the older kids. I was young, but was much more mature in my head. Well, at least it felt that way. I was comfortable with an older crowd. Around the older group, I was turned into a lot of things older kids did. Things like smoking weed, drinking alcohol, partying. As I got older, I guess you can say I found a way to block the things that bothered me out. We all know substance abuse is not the answer. However, at that time, I didn't. There was something about doing things I wasn't supposed to be doing that gave me a rush. Early on, I was just around it and witnessed it as opposed to actually doing it. Though it wasn't too long before I gave in and began engaging in the bad behavior myself. A lot of the time, I was around the trouble because I allowed myself to be. Most of the time, when things hit the fan, I ended up with the short end of the straw. For instance, I remember a time when I was at a local park district that I used to hang around in Evanston, not too far from Rogers Park. I was with a bad group of kids. I must have been 12 going on 13. And they thought it would be fun to walk into a 7-Eleven not too far from the park and grab whatever they wanted and run out without paying for the items. Just for being with the wrong crowd, I was guilty by association. I didn't steal anything, so why should I have to run? When the Evanston police finally caught up with us at the park, many of the kids scattered. I didn't feel like I had to run. I was wrong about that. I was guilty just because I was with them. The police picked me up for theft, and I was brought down to the juvenile hall on Roosevelt, where I was in for a rude awakening. I had never been in any kind of trouble that had placed me in juvie. Since it was my first offense, I was told my mother had to come to pick me up. I was greatly disappointed in myself. When I arrived, they brought me in and put me in the group holding cell that must have had 30 or so offenders that were waiting for court to be released. However, by the looks of this crowd, it appeared no one was getting out. As soon as I was put in group holding, they must have smelled the fear on me. I was a really little guy compared to the other kids. I was punked out by a few of them, and my sneakers were taken from me. I did not even attempt to fight back because there was no doubt I was smaller and outnumbered. So I found an open corner and sat on a bench barefoot as I waited to be called. It was my first experience in an environment like that, and it was terribly degrading. I vowed then and there that I would never, ever be back. Sadly, I was wrong. Seeing that environment for the first time left an indelible mark on me. It was all I could think about for a while after that. From being associated with it, I was convinced that was the way life was going to be, and that I was no better than those kids because I had been there. I lost confidence in myself, and I accepted it as a fact that since I had been portrayed as some type of criminal, I was one. I was already angry at the world, and I could not channel my emotions positively. I just accepted whatever came into my life, even if it was bad, and most things in my life seemed to be bad rather than good. I do remember some good moments. I finished all of grade school and graduated eighth grade and was accepted into Von Steuben Metropolitan High School off of Kimball Avenue near Foster. I was enthusiastic about it because it was a big step up from grade school and my high school was only 2 blocks away from home. Freshman year went well. Already dealing with a lot of emotions from the past, I was in a whirlwind of finding my true self, but isn't every teenager? My mom was always working, and I started to get involved in a lot of stuff I shouldn't have been doing. I was smoking weed on a regular basis. I wasn't a big drinker. I only did this to block out the anxiety and stress I was dealing with. My sophomore year wasn't off to a good start. I was short credits, so I was demoted back to freshman level. I will say that it didn't matter what I was going through or doing. I was always getting just enough done to pass. I didn't cut class or blow off school like a lot of my friends were doing. I did every now and then, but never made a habit of it. I messed around a lot in school, so a lot of the time I never had a summer break. I was always in and out of summer school and night school just to make my credits up so I would be able to graduate. My sophomore, junior, and senior years were unquestionably the most difficult years of my life. My sophomore year, my mom started dating a guy by the name of Sean Gale. I only met him a few times. He was a sports figure. He played professional football for the Chicago Bears and was a prominent member of the team in 1985 when they won the Super Bowl. I wasn't too hyped about it, but then I was never too hyped about my mom's relationships. I didn't care if he played for the Chicago Bears. My mom was already gone working a lot, and now she was dating again. I will say I was at least a little jealous because I missed my mom. However, there was little or nothing I could do about it, so I just tried to cope the best way I knew how. Every time my mom left me at home, or I knew she was going to be gone for a while, that was my green light to roll up and smoke up to get my mind right. Soon after she began dating Gail, my mom started to act very differently. She appeared to me to be very detached and not acting like herself. I didn't pay too much attention to it, but every now and then I'd ask her what's new or how she was feeling. She once admitted to me that she was pretty sure that Sean was involved with other women because she had received a letter in the mail. Well, you don't need to be with a man like that, I remember telling her. You deserve better than that. Of course, nothing I said really mattered because I remember what she had said, that I'm just a child and she will always be the adult, and it was her own personal life. Looking back, I deeply wish she had listened to me just this one time. Sophomore year was still in full swing for me, and so was night school. I attended Roosevelt High School for night school, which was not far from the regular high school that I attended during the day. Roosevelt was just further down Kimball Avenue past Lawrence. I really needed to earn some extra cash to get by. I didn't want to ask my mom for money anymore, so I started selling weed part time. And I saw that I had the advantage to do so by being in 2 separate schools. I made sales during my transition periods and on bathroom breaks, if necessary. It was my way to earn my own money. It was my way to live and survive without having to ask anyone for anything. In the midst of everything I had going on, I became aware that something terrible had happened with my mom's friend and she had been dating. I guess this man, Sean Gale, had been dating many other women besides my mom. One of the other women that he was dating was found dead in her Deerfield home. She had been shot multiple times and she had also been pregnant. I'm assuming with Sean's baby. I was aware he didn't like kids or want any of his own. I saw this on the news regarding this terrible tragedy, and I was kind of shocked because this man was once a friend of my mom's, though not a good friend, since he'd been treating my mom bad along with the other women he was involved with, and she had broken up with him several months before the murder. Now, hearing this news, I was hesitant to speak of it. I wanted to ask my mom if she was aware of what happened to Sean's girlfriend, but I didn't know how to approach her about it. So I kept quiet and just waited to see how things would play out. A few nights after seeing the news of this tragedy, my mom asked me to come upstairs. As I made my way to her home office, this terrible news was in the back of my mind. Once I got there, she asked me to have a seat and wanted to have a talk with me. She seemed shocked herself. I asked my mom what was wrong. She took a deep breath, followed by a long sigh. She turned to me and said that I had been kind of right. About what? I responded. She told me Sean had been cheating on her with other women, and that's why she had broken up with him. I told her that I knew. Then she asked me how I knew. That is when I told her I saw something terrible on the news about Sean's girlfriend being murdered. Wow, I didn't think you watched the news like that, she responded. Well, it just happened to be on and it caught my attention because I heard Sean's name, I told her. I then asked her if Sean was okay. She said she hadn't heard from him and didn't expect to. She even seemed relieved, and I knew it was because she had parted ways with Sean many months prior to this murder. And I wondered if my mom had considered that if she was still with him, if it would have been her that was killed. Following the murder of Sean's pregnant girlfriend, there was a rise in police activity, and for some inexplicable reason, they were focused on my mom and me. This struck me as quite odd because I knew without a doubt that neither my mom or I had anything to do with something so horrible. Everything was still moving along as usual. My mom was still working. I was still going to school, but sometimes in the air just didn't feel right. I felt as if I was being watched. I had this inescapable feeling that I was being followed. I felt this way most of my sophomore year, and my feelings were spot on. I later found out that the phones in our house were tapped. The police were stealing our mail, rummaging through our trash cans, and I was being followed to school. After finding out that my mom and I were being investigated behind the scenes, I was puzzled by this and also paranoid. My privacy was being invaded. I kept telling myself I wasn't guilty of any wrongdoing, so why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to my family and me? I was very anxious due to all the additional pressure these detectives were putting on us. So now I'm at that I've been live for almost an hour, and I like to keep these videos around an hour long. So we are going to move on to chapter 3, but then after this chapter, we will break and then we'll be doing another video at to read for another hour. But I don't want to keep us on forever today. Chapter 3, the interrogation. Tell us what we want to hear, Andrew says. As soon as we entered the building, I was led down the hall to an interrogation room. I took a seat, and an officer told me to sit tight. Again, I committed the unpardonable sin of asking for a lawyer. And again, they told me I didn't need one. I felt trapped, but even if I had a chance to run, there was no point. When the door opened again, 3 officers entered the room. I had no clue who the other 2 were, and I was introduced. One of them, I was told, was a juvenile officer and that he would be present the whole time throughout the questioning. Then they all left, and that was the last time I ever saw the juvenile officer. A few moments later, the 2 officers came back into the room. They both took a seat across the table from me. They asked if I needed anything to drink. I told them, no, I'm just tired. They began to ask me if I knew why I was there and why all of this was going on. I told them I may have an idea on why I was there. They asked me what I thought what that may be. Is this about a murder that took place regarding an ex-boyfriend of my mom's? I asked. They said it was and wondered how I knew about it. I told them I saw it on the news. Pause for drink. Now that I'm older, I understand that I didn't have to answer one single question they asked me, but I did not know that when I was young. Also, I knew I had nothing to hide as I was not guilty of any crime. Regardless, I still asked, and they kept denying me a lawyer. They had clearly violated my civil rights from the moment they had contact with me earlier that morning, following up until now. They asked what I knew about this murder. I told them I only knew what I'd seen on the news. They asked if I knew the woman who had been murdered. I did not. All I knew was that the woman was a girlfriend of Sean Gale. They asked me what my mom's relationship with Sean Gale was. I responded that they were friends and in the past had been possibly more. Then they asked me to explain my whereabouts the day the murder had taken place. All I could remember was that I happened to be homesick that day, and my mom spent the morning taking care of me. They started asking me about exact times and whatnot, and I couldn't remember. Who would pay attention to that? Like I knew I would be sitting here in an interrogation room months later being asked questions about exact times. These cops were driving me crazy. I stopped cooperating for a while. One cop was acting like he was on my side, while the other was being a complete asshole to me for no reason. I was getting pretty fed up with their games. Why are you guys treating me as if I'm a suspect? I asked them. The officer that was losing his patience with me was asked by his partner to leave the room, and the officer, playing nice, moved me to a different room with a couch. He told me to get some rest. He then shut the door and left. I felt hopeless. I can't begin to tell you how mentally damaging this was to me. I had an awful feeling. Was I a suspect in this investigation? I sat down and held my head in my hands in despair as I began to feel as if I was really a suspect in this investigation. There was a lot these officers were leaving out. They really were trying to pin this murder on me. I started to panic. I noticed a big glass mirror and had no doubt they were watching me. I saw a phone on the wall and walked over to it. I picked up the receiver and there was no dial tone. I was exhausted and stressed out, so I laid down to try and get some rest. I felt like I was in that room forever. The door finally opened. It was one of the officers. He told me to get up and follow him. He led me to he led me back to the room I had been in when we first arrived. I took a seat, and the questioning started up again. Then the angry officer stormed into the room and yelled at me. I will never forget these words. You better start telling us what we want to hear, he demanded. One of you is going down. It's either going to be you or your mother. That's when I knew they had my mom also. All this time, they had been holding her. I agree, Kat. I'm not going to admit to doing something I didn't do, I protested. I also kept insisting that my mom was just as innocent as me. She was home with me the morning this murder took place. She couldn't have had anything to do with it. Yet this truth had no impact on these officers. They had me trapped and I couldn't leave. I couldn't have a lawyer. I couldn't see my mom or any other family members. I started to tear up from the anger I had for these Lake County officers and how they slowly and maliciously broke down my family and my home. All I wanted was out of that situation. I kept asking myself what I did so wrong to deserve this. Why me? Why my family? What do you do in a situation that you know you're telling the truth, but the police officers have held you captive for hours on end, feeding you lies, and then telling you that you are a liar? There was no end to their distortions and manipulations. They slowly started to turn me against my mom. They said my mom said I wasn't at home sick the day of the murder. I told them that's not possible. They insisted it was. I was getting to my breaking point. I couldn't take any more of the mental abuse that I was enduring with these Lake County detectives. They broke me down to the point that I would say anything to get myself out of that situation. The frustrated detective yelled at me again. If you don't start talking, you will be in prison for the rest of your life. At that point, I burst into tears and began saying precisely what they wanted to hear. I knew it wasn't right, but I just wanted to be out of there, whatever the cost. I was worn out and confused. My head was pounding, and I could not think right. There was even some of me starting to believe that my mom could have done something so terrible as commit a murder. These detectives fed me lies, and I began to believe them. You want to go down for something your mother did? They asked. If she loves you, she wouldn't have you in this fucked up situation. Your mother doesn't love you. No real mother would put their kid in this position. So start talking, or you will go to prison for the rest of your life. I couldn't believe how hopeless I felt. They had me where they wanted me, and a detective then brought in a pen and paper and told me to write down exactly what they wanted. As they repeated their line of questioning, I wrote down the answers that suited them to their satisfaction. As instructed, I put the narrative all down on paper. I did this on 3 different sheets of paper. I guess they chose the one that suited them best and that they felt would hold up against my mom. I was so hurt and so damaged mentally and emotionally. I felt as if I had betrayed my mother. The detectives told me not to feel that way. Your mother betrayed you for setting you up to take the fall for this murder, one of them said. I was sobbing uncontrollably. The detective said not to worry. He said that I had done good and that the woman and her baby did not deserve to die. They said that if my mother were innocent, we wouldn't be here. By now, my head was so messed up that I was shell shocked into believing that my mom could have done this. I didn't want to believe it, and the detectives convinced me that she did. My emotions were spiraling out of control. I was broken mentally, emotionally, and physically. I would never be the same after this. To this day, now at 27 years old, I'm currently dealing with PTSD. It's very hard to deal with all the abuse I have been put through by the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force. Of course, none of that matters to the task force. The detectives got what they wanted, and I was finally released. Emily says, I explained to the detectives that I did not have a good relationship with my mom. In hindsight, I think they favored that. I was interrogated for 12 hours straight. I was asked what I was doing on October 4th of 2007. I did not have the precise answer to that question. For me, that date was of no significance. At the time, my daily routine consisted of going to school and chilling with friends, so I could not differentiate the exact date at will. Yet they continued to ask the same questions over and over in different ways, as if I were going to give a different answer. They told me that was the day a woman named Ronnie Ryder was and her unborn child were shot and killed in her home in Deerfield, Illinois. I didn't know who that was and had never heard that news simply because I don't watch the news. Then they continued to tell me that my twin brother Andrew helped my mom to commit this murder. They told me my mom had persuaded Andrew into helping her commit this crime and how they put the murder weapon in a bucket of cement and threw it into Lake Michigan. It was unbelievable. They dug deep into my family's lives and our history, though it was more of the not so good experiences they wanted to know about, which everyone has, whether they would like to share it or not. Though none of though none of it was in any nature related to, nor could be connected to this murder. By bringing all of that attention to my past trauma, they caused all of those suppressed emotions to resurface. Under the circumstances, they really took me in a negative direction. The divorce of my mom and dad surfaced, and I told them I hadn't seen him in over 7 years. I expressed that I missed him. From the moment he left my life, I fell into a deep depression. Okay. I think that was a main underlying reason that caused a rift in their relationship with my mother. The detectives told me that they would be able to find him for me. They wanted me to agree to details I couldn't even recall. I wouldn't say yes or no if I weren't absolutely sure. I spoke the truth. I could only say, I'm not sure and I don't know about things for God knows how long until it all started getting to my head. That level of mental pressure broke me. I became so frustrated, I began to bang my head on the metal table over and over again until my eyes filled with tears. That is when they finally stopped and left the room. I pulled my phone out to text my grandma again. The detectives came back into the room and said they were receiving cell phone signals from within the room and asked if I had a phone on me. I told them I did. Then they demanded I hand over my cell phone and said, Didn't we tell you that you can't have a phone on you? No, I answered, you didn't. You didn't tell me anything. The detectives just gave each other a look. I turned my phone off and I handed it to them. You needed a password to turn it back on, which I did not give them. They asked me who I had been messaging. I told them my mom and my grandma to let them know where I was. They took my phone and left the room again. It was somewhere around 12 hours that I had been in that room. My God. They escorted me to another interrogation room where they had been keeping Brandon. They offered us McDonald's, which I refused. The emotional distress I was under would not allow me the desire to eat. I just wanted to go home. It was difficult to process everything that had just happened. It had felt like my whole world had come crashing down on me. Was everything they just told me true? I didn't know what to believe. I just sat there thinking, what's going to happen now? About 2 hours later, we were finally able to leave. Brandon says, on January 4th of 2008, when my siblings and I were interrogated on our whereabouts on October 4th of 2007, I was so lost on what was going on. Everything they were asking went over my head. I had zero clues about what they were asking or why. At that time, I could only answer, I don't know, or not that I can remember, to most of their questions. The only thing from that time that I remember was that I would wake up before 7 a.m., around 6:45 a.m., because I had school and I took the school bus, so I had to walk to where the school bus would pick me up. I remember walking out the back door and I could hear my sister and mom fighting again. I don't remember what they were fighting about. It was pretty regular that they argued, and it was all just white noise at that point. Though that is all I remember because my mornings were pretty ritualistic from waking up to going to school. That's the end of that chapter. Let me see. How long is the next chapter? I'm going to go on to chapter 4. Chapter 4 will be the last one of the day. That should bring us to about halfway done with the book. Chapter 4 is Reunited. Andrew says, after I was released from questioning, I still had no idea where my mom was or where my brother and sister were. I was put back in the unmarked vehicle and we went for another ride. They transported me to what looked to me like their headquarters. We parked and they escorted me inside. Then they brought me into a waiting room. After a few moments, they brought me down the hall to what looked like a children's playroom. As soon as I opened the door, I saw my sister and brother. I don't think I've ever in my life been happier to see them. Emily says, the detective handed me my phone back and reunited us with Andy. Andy says, now that we were all together, we began to talk amongst ourselves quietly. We each started telling our stories and described all the tactics these detectives had been using on us. I told my sister that they tried to pin the murder on me. I told my sister that mom couldn't have done it because she was home with me the morning of the murder. My sister said that they told her that I had committed the murder, but then switched it up on her and started pointing fingers at my mom. She knew this wasn't right. We all looked at each other in confusion. We pondered the unthinkable. We asked each other if our mother really could have been capable of something so horrific. The detectives really got us believing she did. I was sick to my stomach and I wanted to throw up. I think most of it came from the amount of stress and damage we all just endured. I felt sick because I knew what was forced on me just to stay out of prison. A false statement. They had gotten it out of me. How could I live with myself knowing that I had confessed to a story that was nothing but a lie? I felt that if it would be my fault if they took my mother. I didn't get into too much detail with my sister and brother about the false statement. We were all going through enough. I couldn't imagine what my mom was dealing with on her own. If the detectives placed my mom under arrest, I knew a part of me would die inside. I was so mentally drained. I just wanted to wake up from this horrible nightmare. That's when we all heard the door open and looked up to see that it was one of the detectives. He asked us to get our things together and said it was time to leave. I had no idea where we were going. I hoped it would be back home. However, after a day like this, who knew? My sister, brother, and I piled into the back of the unmarked vehicle, and once again we were off. So now there was room in the car for all three of us? But I digress. It felt like forever, but we finally pulled up to a big parking lot, and I saw my grandmother and grandfather. We were dropped off into their custody. Emily says, my grandma was there to drive us home. She informed us that the police had picked up my mom down the block that morning as she was leaving for work, and that is why we could not get hold of her. Andrew says, my grandmother and grandfather were furious at what the detectives of Lake County had pulled. All I kept hearing was how our civil rights had been violated and how severely we had been mistreated and how unprofessional these detectives conducted themselves. I wasn't aware that my grandmother and grandfather were searching for us the entire time. It turned out the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force was also playing games with them and withholding our whereabouts. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I didn't understand why. My mom was still being held for questioning, and we didn't know where. Were they pulling the same bullshit with her that they pulled with us? Or was it much worse? They could only hold my mom for 72 hours if they didn't charge her. We just had to be patient. We made our way back home. When we arrived, I was hoping they didn't flip the house too bad. My hopes were greatly disappointed. Emily says, when we arrived back home and walked through the front door, it looked like a tornado had hit it. As bad as the damage was to the house, it was a fraction of the emotional anguish we were feeling on the inside. Andrew says, as we all slowly entered the house, we were in for an unpleasant surprise. I say surprise, but based on the rest of the day's events, in retrospect, I should have been ecstatic that the house was still standing. Every room in the house was flipped upside down. I felt as if I didn't have a home anymore. It was a broken home. I can't begin to tell you how awful I felt. My life felt crushed. With the overwhelming amount of abuse the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force had subjected me to, I knew I would never be the same. I would never come back from this. Immediately, I began to think about dying. I simply thought death was a way of escaping what I had done to my mom. These thoughts would haunt me from the time of the abuse up until now, 11 years later. I'm still dealing with post traumatic stress disorder, and I've never felt the same since. Not only was my home flipped upside down, they flooded my basement purposely. All I wanted to do was get out of there, check into a nice hotel, and never leave. I couldn't do that. I started in the basement cleaning up about a foot of water that's spread throughout the entire basement. I used mops, brooms, and buckets to clear the water out the best way I knew how. As I did this, I cried because I did not know how to deal with the situation. I felt cold, violated, scared, and hopeless. There was nothing else I could do except try to deal with it. In the back of my mind, I was still wondering if my mother could have really committed such a horrible crime. Of course, I knew she had been with me the morning of the murder, and that she wasn't capable of this. But the police had played so many tricks on me that they had me questioning everything I knew to be true. They had me believing she had committed this heinous crime, but in reality, I knew it was not possible. Finally, my mother was able to make a phone call. I heard my grandmother and grandfather on the phone with her, and that she would be released if they didn't have enough to charge her. That gave me a little bit of relief, but I knew that this was far from over. I still did not come clean about what the police had forced me into saying. I was scared. I was overwhelmed with the feeling that I was my mother's alibi, and I folded on her because of the amount of mental abuse these detectives subjected me to. They had made me feel as if I had done something wrong when I knew in my heart that I was innocent. They painted a picture that my mom was a cold, heartless monster when I knew differently. I knew my mother was a wonderful, loving, and hardworking woman, not capable of doing what these lying detectives had said she did. But it didn't matter. They had forced me into admitting a lie, their lie. They had broken me down. At that moment, all avenues were closed for me. I just hoped that my innocent mother would make it out without being charged with the murder of a woman and her unborn child. After 3 long days, they released her. I finally got at least one long awaited sigh of relief amidst the storm. Brandon says, my mom was in questioning for 72 hours before she was allowed to return home. When we finally got home, my siblings and I learned that the police had actually taken my mom the day before. That's why she wasn't there when I checked that morning when the police arrived. It was because they already had taken her from us. So after our mom came back to us, moving forward was awkward because my mom had to make sure that if anything were to happen to her, there was a plan for us to be taken care of. And there we go for today. Um, when we pick up the next time, we'll be on page 47 of um, 95. Um, so we're like halfway. But they took these kids and interrogated them without an adult's knowledge or consent, did not have an adult there with them. It was not a law at that time. It is now here in Illinois, thankfully. But can you just imagine? And confessions really get people at times where they're like, I would never say I did something I didn't do. So when there's a confession in a case, they're like, the people are guilty. They confessed. But it happens more than you think. You don't have to be Brendan Dassey with um with his IQ level to fall victim to officers who are trained to trick you. They lie, cheat, and steal to get you to say what they want you to say. They have a narrative and they need to make the pieces fit their narrative. They're not looking for the truth or justice. They just want to solve a case. And in this one, it's because it involves Sean Gale. For those of you who either don't follow football in or not from this area, the 1985 Super Bowl Chicago Bears are gods here. So Sean Gale, whatever the involvement, his name being in this case is major here. So this Lake County Major Crimes Task Force needs to solve this case. And they're not looking at Sean Gale because he's a celebrity. They just want to get their picture taken with him and, yeah, the Bears, um, and get his autograph. So these kids are 16 and 12, and there's no adult there. Oh, I now see Bryce is on here. I didn't see that before. I put these glasses on, but then it's still blurry as I was trying to even read the book. Um, sorry, I'm also sick, so I'm like tired and coughing and everything else. Kat says Sean Gale is shady as all get out. And Kat says these officers went to the same school of investigations as Manitowoc. Marnie is innocent 1,000%. Sean had something to do with this. Yeah, we'll be getting into that at some point. Um, but like I said, I am back with the Marni Yang case on Tuesday. Tuesday is Melissa Kaluzinski's birthday, and I'm going down to the prison to visit with Melissa, but I will also be driving Larry, Marnie's dad, to the prison with me. He is not physically able to do that drive on his own. So he has not seen Marnie in like 2.5 years. So I told him the next time I go visit Melissa, if you want to make an appointment, because the prison is still operating under COVID rules, where, before COVID, I was able to just go to the prison on whatever day I wanted. Now you have to sign up for an appointment online, and you have to do it at least 7 days in advance. So I told them what day I was going, and then it's also um um time slots that you have to sign up for. So I always sign up for the 8:30 to 11 a.m. slot. So I told him the date and the time that I was going. So then he signed up too. So we'll drive down there, and now um, he'll be able to visit with Marnie at the same time that I'm visiting with Melissa for her birthday. And this is the first time I've been able to visit Melissa in months because she's constantly been in COVID um, quarantine. Marnie is not doing well medically. She walks with a walker now. Um, there's a whole bunch more to that. I'm not sure what all I can get into on that yet. Um, but after I do have the visit on Tuesday, we'll do a live. Um, Maybe we'll do a live on Tuesday when I get back from the prison, because I'm taking the day completely off of work. There's no way I want to do the because I'll be getting home around 3 o'clock my time, and I'm not going to want to go to work afterwards. And work just changed my hours on weekdays that I'm not going to be starting until 3 p.m. So um I don't know as of yet when will be the next time I'll be reading the book, if I'll decide I want to read tomorrow, or that would make the most sense is if I popped on tomorrow and read it, because then Tuesday would be I go on the visit, and then Wednesday I could do a live and just talk about the visit. So, but you'll have to stay tuned to our Facebook pages. I always fill in Christopher on what my schedule is and when I can go live, and then he makes events for it on the Justice with Jack page. I can come on here. And then my book, now that Christopher just discovered that the Wisconsin has asked for an extension to respond to Kathleen Zellner's latest filing from August 17th for Stephen Avery's case, that they want an extension to December 1st. That's what I was waiting for now on my book, uh, um, to include whatever the state had, but now I'm not going to wait. So I'm thinking maybe October 10th. It's a date that I've had in mind for a while. And we've talked about it before. That's my son's birthday, so that's why October 10th is just always a date easy for me to remember, obviously, of when the book would have a pre-release. Excuse me, sorry, I've had this stupid cough for days now. So it has like a pre-release for a month, so some people can purchase the book and read it. In the people who purchase it in that pre-release then have to write a review of it. Christopher tells me, that's what helps in selling the book is having the reviews, which will be hit or miss because we know there's going to be people from, that worship the Avery family who are going to rip into the book and give it bad reviews. So I don't know. And as I started this off too, that Barb just commented on the video I just did the other day saying stupid stuff. So um and now that my work schedule's been changed, that I don't start work until 3 p.m. on weekdays, um maybe I'll have some time to figure out how to get this uploaded onto Amazon and do that this week so it's ready to go by the 10th. Yay. Hopefully I'll feel better soon too, because I'm so tired of being congested and a cough and trying to do all this stuff. All right, I'm gonna go because my husband wants to go fishing. He bought a boat recently and just wants to go fishing all the time. So, and it's getting dark earlier, and I had to work all day or this morning. And so then when I got home, he's like, "Are you done for the day?" I'm like, "No, I still have to do this live video." So, um gonna go fishing. So probably tomorrow at some point. Come on, we'll read the second half of Marni Yang's kids book. And then Tuesday, I do the prison visit. Wednesday, I'll come on and tell y'all how the visit went. And I'll be doing a whole bunch more with the Marni Yang case that her dad has sent me a ton of stuff to go through, and I've got access to the new website they're starting, and they want me to finish the website and get that all up. So all this information, I have to figure out how I want it up on the website. Don't forget to like and hit the bell and subscribe to Justice with Jax, and maybe you'll get notified when I go live, since it's gonna be kind of all over the place when I'm able to hop on. Thank you, everybody, for listening to part one of My Mom Marni. I will see you tomorrow. And as always, investigation continues.